So some more learning. We should have the base of Mikdash immediately. Okay, we start Masech the Sukka right at the beginning. You have it? Ali, you got it? It sort of jumps right in. A sukkah that's over 20 amas tall. You measure it from the inside of the sukkah, not from the outside. You can have a sukkah on a roof, but you can't. The inside of sukkah in the roof is 20 amas above the floor. Sula, it's possible, it's invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda says no. A sukkah like that is kosher. You can have a very tall sukkah. Also, there's a minimal height to the sukkah. It has to be more than 10 tvachim. Tefach is a handbreadth. An amma is 6 tvachim. We said 20 ammas, but 6 times 20. So that's a tall. It's very tall. V'she'ena gvayasar tvachim is also possible. V'she'ena shalish or shleisha defanes. If it doesn't have 3 walls. Traditionally, in the Masech the Sukkah has 3 walls, not 4 walls. We'll see, there's a lot of rayas. But our sukkahs, we try to make 4 walls because the halachas of the farnes sukkah is very complex. And if you make 4 walls, you cover your bases. So if it has less than 3 walls, which we'll see what that's going to mean later on, because really it could be 2 and a tefach, right? If there's more sun than shade, means you need schach. The schach is there for shade. If you have more sun than the shade, then it's possible. Let's say it's half and half. It's going to be a complication later on in the second paragraph. Because in the second paragraph, it's going to tell us if it's kosher if it has more shade than sun. But here it sounds like if there's more sun than shade, it's possible. Half and half is kosher. Over there it's going to tell me there's more shade than sun, it's kosher. Half and half is possible. So it's a contradiction. You can say so. The Gemara is going to explain it there. Okay. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there in Masech the Seirivim. Mavi Shikvaya Messer Mama Yamayat. I skipped an important Rashi. Rashi says more sun than shade. Says what's wrong if there's more sun than shade? Rashi says Hamuat Batul Beroid. Hamuat Batul Beroid. Says it's batal. I'm unfortunately go crazy over here. I don't need it to be batal. It could be that. It's just I don't have enough. I don't have enough schach. I don't need it. Anyway. So it says in Masech the Eruvin. In Eruvin it talks about carrying from a private domain to another private domain, and you're supposed to have an Eruvin at Seiras. 2 private domains, you're not supposed to carry from one to the other. Even biblically, you're not supposed to carry from private to public, but rabbinically, from private to private. And then, let's say there's a few private domains, a few courtyards, surrounding a dead end, a cul-de-sac, an alleyway, which is closed at the end. So, that's also a problem, because that's considered like the public of this private area. Everyone uses that. So at the edge of this cul-de-sac, what you need to do is you need to put a kaira across, a beam going across the alleyway, either vertical or horizontal, a kaira or a lechem. What's that for? Rashi over here says it's a heker. There it wasn't so clear. It wasn't so clear. It's a wall. Type of wall, or if it's just a hecker. So you have to have this recognition where the end of your hecker means recognition. Where the end of the cul-de-sac is. That's not really a public area. It's a private area for the people that live there. So once you put up that, then you're allowed to carry from your courtyard into the cul-de-sac, into that dead-end street, the alleyway. It says Mavi Shikvaya Mesr Mama. It says Mavi, it means Kaira. If the beam is over 20 amas, we're comparing that to what we said by Sukkah. A Sukkah that's over 20 amas, we said is invalid. The beam that's over 20 amas, it says Yemayat. You lower it down. Rabbi Yehuda Imer and Etzara. Rabbi Yehuda is very consistent. In Sukkah, he says it's kosher. And by the Mava, he says that you don't have to lower the beam that's going across the edge of the alleyway. You don't have to lower it down. Gemara asks, why by the Sukkah is it so strict? It says no, invalid. There's no discussion. And by the Mavoi, it says, well, you lower it down. Now, which one does it want me to say is a little bit unclear. There's two answers of the Gemara, and each one is going to pull the question a different way. So it's just asking that if I have the same setup, the same template in the Mishnah, then the halacha should be the same. Both of them are possible. In both of them, if I lower it down, it's going to be kosher. But by one of them, the way it teaches it to me, it says puzzle. Go figure out that you have to lower it down. And by the Mavai, it doesn't tell me puzzle. It just says right away, lower it down. It gives me the solution. So Gemara gives two answers. Sukka de'oraisa tani psula, Mavi derabbanan tani takanta. Sukkah is a biblical law. You have to sit in the sukkah. The Mavai, the alleyway, I'm allowed to carry rabbinically. It's private domain to another semi-private domain. So I can carry there. It's just a rabbinical law. So Rashi says, the way Rashi learns this is a little different than Tosfos. Rashi learns that the Mishnah is telling me an earlier law. So it wants to tell me that you should know that you weren't Yoitze, the earlier law. There's an earlier law that's a biblical law that precedes the rabbinic law. And it's telling me, the rabbinic law, the Mishnayos, is coming to tell me that if you didn't do it correctly, you weren't Yoitze, that earlier law, the biblical law. The Mishnah is telling me the rabbinic law. Now, the rabbinic law can't tell me that I wasn't Yoitze an earlier law, because it is the law. It's saying the law right now. When you're teaching the law, you can't just say it's invalid. You have to tell me how to do it. First, give instructions. After you give instructions, then you can say you didn't do it right. But first, I need the instructions. So the Mishnah is rabbinic law, and it's telling me the instructions. So Tani Takanta. By the Sukkah, it's telling me that I wasn't Yaitze, a law that the instructions were given previously. What's Rashi's pshat? Tosfos' pshat is that when it says Yemayit, I could have thought that maybe it's only L'chatchila. Lower it down. L'chatchila, I should lower it down. But B'diavad, I'm Yaitze anyway. It's Vaya Derabanan. We're not so concerned if you make that mistake. Vaya Daraisa, we want to make sure that you know this is very strict. We said invalid, like a big red X. So we said this is no good. But by the Mavli, we choose the language that's lighter, which is what we really wanted to say. It's just that by the biblical law, we had to be careful no one made that mistake. That's the answer number one. Any questions?
It's like now you understand because I was it's mutter derisa. Derisa is the restriction by Yahweh. And the rabbi said, no, look too much back on the shoes of rock and these things. Whereas here, they're not trying to define a mavoi there. Whereas here, we're trying to define what is a it's like we're trying to define what is a mavoi. That's what I'm saying?
Yeah. The only thing is that if you want, you could learn it that the analogy is accurate. Both of them were not defining the Mavli, we're not defining the Sukkah. there's a detail in Hilchas Sukkah, there's a detail in Hilchas Mavai that it can't be over 20 hours. That detail, it doesn't set it up symmetrical. Iba Yesema, another teretz. Biblical laws can also say the solution. Don't worry about according to Tosfos, someone may make a mistake. According to Rashi, I never had a question of if I can say a solution by a biblical law. I only had a problem of saying psula invalid by a rabbinic law because I never gave instructions yet. So, right? But by the biblical law, yeah, you can say it's a kanta. So why didn't it say sukkah shigavay l'mayla mesrama yimayet? Lower down the sukkah. Just tell me the solution. Give me instructions. It says mil sukkah din afishe milay afishe milsa. Pasuk v'tani psula. Mavid loy nafish milay tani takanta. There's too many details in this Mishnah. Like Rashi quotes the Gemara Psachim, it says, "Leilam yishnadam l'talmidei derech katzara." A person should always teach a student concise. Don't complicate things. So if it was gonna tell me solutions to the 4 cases of the Mishnah, it would have to go like this: Sukkah that's too tall, you lower it down. If it's not high enough, then you raise it up. If it doesn't have 3 expandable, right? Doesn't have 3 walls, so you have to add another wall. If it has too much, each solution is going to be different. But if you just wants to tell me invalid, so it can say one invalid on the whole thing. And it's derech k'tzara, it's easier to remember because Mishnayos were learned by memory. So you just say invalid. But yeah, yeah, that's what it seems. So when the Gemara says that means that we would have wanted to say takana, and that's what. Now we'll go back to the Gemara's question. What was the Gemara suggesting? I should have said this or I should have said that. So, but the problem is that when there's too many details, you can't say that. Okay. By Mavi, there's only one case. There's only one detail. If it's too tall, you lower it down. Okay. I think the pshat in the Gemara right now goes like this. We just said that a sukkah that's too tall is biblically invalid. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that from? From where are these words? You're going to get 3 answers why a sukkah that's too tall is invalid. By the way, Rabbi Yehuda that says that it is valid is going to have to argue with all of these 3 reasons. Amar Rabba. First is Rabba. Pretty much the same generation. We're going to have Rabba, Rab Zera. Remember Rabba and Rab Zera? It was higher. I said Rabba was higher than Rab Zera in the Purim story. Yeah, Rabba, Rab Zera, and then Rabba. Rabba was a student, so it's sort of like in layers. Yeah. First answer is Amar Rabba, Amar Damakra. Pasuk says, L'man yedid darisechem ki b'sukkah sishafti es b'nei Yisrael. Drop the word darisechem and just learn it. This is what Rabba is saying. So that you should know that sukkahs I commanded you to sit in. I shafti. I had you sit. With a command, I had you sit. Now, literally what the pasuk means is that you should know, all the future generations should know that you dwelt in sukkahs when you were coming out of Egypt. Or whatever that means. But the way Rabba's learning it is that you should know that I commanded you to be in a sukkah. Hishavti is not that I had you sit in history, but I had you sit right now. So what that means is like this: a person has to recognize that he's in a sukkah. If the sukkah is until 20 amas, so you can see he's in a sukkah. The mila meser mama above 20 amas, person, his eyes don't go up so high, especially if he has a big brim hat. So he doesn't see that it's the roof. Now again, we're going to see on the next page that if in certain situations your eyes would go up so high. Let's wait for the next page for that. But if you have a small sukkah, it doesn't really matter. A kosher sukkah, so such a tall rectangular sukkah, very tall. It's not a cube, very tall. You won't see all the way to the roof, and you have to see the schach is the sukkah. The walls are there to hold up the schach, but you have to be able to see the schach. And you don't go like that. Yeah, probably probably Kabbalistically, that's the explanation. Right. Right. He's saying that Daniel Aaron is saying that you have to be able to see the Shekhinah and the Schach. The Shofar, the sounds of the Shofar. Remember the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe's room. The sounds of the 100 kailas come down as the Schach. Okay, it's going to discuss that later. It's going to discuss the height and it's going to discuss the walls. You have to wait 2 pages up. Rav Zera Amar Mehacha. Rav Zera has his own pshat. But Rabbi's pshat is that you have to be able to see the schach. Too tall, you can't see it. Rav Zera says, the sukkah should be for shade by day from the heat. It means the schach needs to shade you from the sun. Rav Zera says like this: Desir Mama Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah. The Ma'alim Esr Mama Adam Ein Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah Ela B'Tzel Defan. It's too tall. The sun is not going to be enough time. Well, the sun is only going to be directly above you for a little bit of the day, midday. If it's very tall, then the shade of the sun, because the sun is not always directly above you, it depends on the seasons, but it's not going to be coming down onto you. It's going to be shining down. The shade of the schach is going to protect it. You're going to see the shadow on the walls, not on you. You have a picture there? In the back. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, okay. So the shade, if you have the new Gemara, the picture, the shade is going to be going out of the sukkah against the walls, not coming on you. And Desir Mama, Reb Zera says, until 20 Amas, Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah. I brought you a Gemara. I'm saving it for you. Come over here. There's a seat over here. Until 20 Amas, a person is sitting in the shade of the sukkah. It's over 20 Amas. Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah. B'Tzel Dechanis is sitting in the shade of the walls. Sitting in the shade of the walls. Follow. Now, I don't need to actually be under the shade. But my sukkah needs to be a sukkah that the shade comes from the schach. It's a shear in the sukkah. Right. I don't have an answer to that question. Could be. The sukkah has. What we're saying is the sukkah has to be built in a way that the shade would be coming. The shade on me would be coming from the schach, not from the walls.
So what is the purpose of the shade? I mean, it sounds like a little backwards reason. I build a sukkah so that the shade comes. No, I build a sukkah that happens to be shade. You're telling me I'm building a sukkah.
No, the schach gives shade. That's the point of the sukkah. The schach should give me shade. Shade from what? From the sun. shade from the heat. So if I'm not getting my shade, or if the sukkah is built in a way that the schach is pointless, so then it's not considered schach. It's just wall.
Why do I need the shade?
That is what a sukkah is. A sukkah is shade. A sukkah is shade. If you build a sukkah for shade, that's a kosher sukkah.
Why do I need shade?
That's later.
It's a cloudy day. No, it's a cloudy day. There's no sun.
No,
I'm building a
no,
sukkah.
but the point of the sukkah is to, in other words, like this. Let me tell you that if you build a sukkah for modesty purposes, so a changing room or something, but the shade doesn't matter. You know, like those changing cabana that's changing things like by the pools or something. That hypothetical. So that is that's not a sukkah. It wasn't there for shade. It was made for tznius. That's not mama's not a kosher sukkah. Even if there's a roof on it, you have to either build it for the mitzvah of sukkah, or if I build it for shade, it's also a kosher sukkah. That's what we're going to learn. Shade is an integral part of the sukkah. So Reb Zera says that the shade has to be coming from what the sukkah is. The sukkah is ha. Here, your sukkah's walls.
Doesn't that depend on the time of the day?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the time of day. It's also going to depend on location. I don't have an answer to all of that, but it has to be built in a way that it would theoretically be working, that the schacha is effective. Yeah. Right. Let's. Abaya is going to ask a question that's probably everyone's question. Abaya is going to ask Reb Zera. Remember, Abaya is a student of Rabbah. I guess he was hanging around over there together with Reb Zera. He has a question on Reb Zera. Says, Amalei Abaya. Abaya says to him, Elamayata, if that's the case, that you need shade from the sun by the schach. Elamayata, Sukka Sebastris Kanayim. Ashris Kanayim is a valley. If you build a sukkah in the valley, you don't have you don't have the sun. It's always shaded. Machlekes, yeah. Anania covered. Right. Could be. He's telling you that you have to remember the clouds of glories. Okay. So Abaya's question is like this: if you make a sukkah in the valley, according to you, Reb Zera, that you literally need shade from the schach. You're not getting shade from the schach. You're getting from the mountains. Amalei Hasa, Reb Zera says to Abaya, Hasam, the question that you're asking over there, Dal Ashtris Kanayim, remove the mountains, remove the valley. It could sell sukkah. Your sukkah works. You have shade from the sukkah. Hacha, but over here, Dal Defanes, if I remove the walls, like it sell sukkah. Remember, I didn't get shade from the schach. Schach is 20 amas high. You're getting shade from the walls. And the walls is not the sukkah. So if I remove everything external, what am I left with? So by the Ashtris Kanayim, I remove everything external. I'm left with the kosher sukkah under 20 amas, I hope. But if over here we have a sukkah that's too tall and the shade is coming from the walls, so remove everything external, like you're saying. Okay, so remove the wall. What am I left with? I still don't have shade. I don't have shade from the schach. I don't have shade. There's no wall. I don't have anything. There's no shade. Right. Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, well, the schach is going to collapse. But that's not really Rav Zera's point. Rav Zera's point is that you need shade, and you don't have shade. Rava, this is the third teretz. Remember, the first teretz is to see the schach. The second teretz is shade from the schach. And now Rava Mehacha. Basukah's Teisha Shivas Yamim. Basukah, you should dwell 7 days. You drop the word dwell. Basukah for 7 days. Amra Torah, the Torah says, Kol Shivas Yamim Tzei Mediras Keva V'Shei B'Dir Sarai. The Torah wants you to sit in a temporary dwelling. Basukah for 7 days. You build a sukkah that can last for 7 days. Until 20 amas, you build it temporary, like a tent. But if you're building it tall, I think we know about this. You have to build it permanent, to build it very strong. If you're building it over 20 amas. So the Torah tells me I have to build a temporary dwelling, not a permanent dwelling. So therefore, if it's too tall, it's going to be a permanent dwelling. Amarle Abaya says to 1 second. Elamayata, according to you, Abaya and Rabbi are friends, right? If a person makes walls made out of iron, and then he puts chach on top. I didn't see that in the Mishnah. Iron sukkah is not considered a sukkah. You can make the walls out of anything. Yeah. There's a shita that holds that you're not supposed to, but I don't know how that's going to work. So here we're saying, he's asking a question that if it needs to be temporary, according to you, then you're saying it's going to be possible if you make it out of iron. Amalei says to him, Hachi kaminalach, that's not what I meant. Until 20 amas, if a person makes it arai, that a person normally makes it arai. Arai means temporary. You see, if I make it thicker, within the thickness of the walls, I also have thin walls. It's just thicker. So the kosher sukkah was there. The plywood. Even if you make layers, make it really strong, but within all of that strength, there's also the weaker one. So you added on other ones to the side. Okay, fine. But when you make it over 20 amas, that the way of building it is, in order to build it, you have to build it keva. So even if you made it weak, which is going to collapse, but so in other words, what Rebbe is saying is that the Torah is not telling me how to build the sukkah, temporary or permanent. I can build it permanent, but it's telling me on the height of the sukkah. What would be a temporary dwelling normally would be under 20 amas. What would be a permanent dwelling would be over 20 amas. And it's the Torah is more concerned about the height of how I would build it, how it would normally be built, than about telling me exactly how I did build it. Okay, the Gemara is going to tell us soon that Rav's teretz is not so perfect, as we'll see. Rashi adds that in, and that's why it's not necessary to say that, but Rashi adds that in. You see when it says, "Devada yesh bechlal keva arai." I made it. The truth is, I don't have to say that. Rav pointing out. If your point is just to tell me the height of how I would normally build it, so however you built it, it doesn't matter. Even if you made titanium, so it doesn't matter. I built it under 20 amas.
What is the English translation of keva?
Keva is permanent, and arai is temporary.
Sounds to me that Rashi's really saying if you have a house and you build a pergola, the way we in Florida have a permanent sukkah, less the schach on the outside. And our intent is really only to use it per se as a sukkah on sukkahs when we then add walls and schach. If that's maybe what he's saying. In other words, you can build a permanent structure, but you don't plan on living in it except on sukkah. So that would be a keva arai.
Very good. Very good. It's interesting. I mean, there is a Tosfos here that discusses an issue regarding the schach. Of course, needs to be arai. The schach needs to be temporary. That's no question. The whole discussion here was what about the walls? The walls also need to be arai. That was our discussion. Okay, let's go to Amud Beis. We have three explanations why a tall sukkah is invalid. Rabbah, you can't see the schach, it's too tall. Reb Zera, you need to get shade from the schach, it's too tall, this shade is coming from the walls. And Rava, that it has to be temporary, not permanent. Right. Right. Asking on Rava. Aaron is asking on Rava. Yeah, the question. He's asking that if the whole sukkah is schach, so why are you telling me halachas about the walls? It's a good question. Very good question. Any trophies left? Kula karaba layamri. No, because you roll it up. That's it's not permanent if the vein gets through. Or, no. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like it should be kosher. Because originally it had a different roof. Now it has this roof. With something else the whole year. Uh-huh. Okay, we have three answers here, and why we're going to ask why does each opinion not say like the other opinion? It says kula karabala yamri. The other two, Reb Zera and Rava, did not say like Rava. Why not? They say hahu yedil dersi. They learned the pshat in the pasuk that when it says sukkahs I caused you to dwell, that's talking about future generations. I caused you to dwell. I keep a sukkah say shafti, because I had you sit in sukkahs earlier in history, and that's why you should sit in the sukkahs today. Not that while you're in the sukkah you have to know that you're in the sukkah and see the schach. Reb Zera nami layamri. He didn't want to say like Reb Zera. Reb Zera says that you need to get shade from the schach. He says the pasuk that he quoted is not talking about a sukkah. It's not talking about a sukkah. It's talking about when Mashiach comes, we're going to have protection from the sun. The sukkah till yom mechayrev. It's talking about later on. It's had nothing to do with this. Reb Zera, how did Reb Zera get away with that? He pulls a pasuk on us that it's not relevant and says Reb Zera imkein lemakra b'chuppah till yom. My sukkah till yom. Reb Zera is being medayik. The pasuk could have said that a canopy will protect you from the sun. Why does it say a sukkah will protect you? It's coming to teach me about Hilchos Sukkah. Shamet Minei Tarti is coming to teach me two things. One, when Mashiach comes, and also about Hilchos Sukkah. Karava Nami Layamri. Why didn't they say like Rava? Rava said that it needs to be permanent. Mishum Kushida Abaya. Because Abaya had a question. Abaya's question was, what about if you made walls of iron? So in other words, there's questions on all of them. Now the question is, the choice that the rabbis made is which question they want. So that's okay. Now, if you remember, we had two questions from Abaya. Abaya had one question about the valley, that if you build a sukkah in a valley, it's not going to be a kosher sukkah. And Reb Zera answered him, well, remove the valley, and what are you left with? Then Abaya had another question on Rava. The question on Rava was, if you build a sukkah out of iron, it's not going to be kosher. So the Gemara says, oh, they don't say like Rava because Abaya had a question. So Taisvus asks, what about Reb Zera? Abaya had a question on Reb Zera also. Taisvus says, Reb Zera's question, Abaya's question on Reb Zera answered very well. The question of Abaya on Rava was not answered so well. Okay. Now what the Gemara is going to do, it's the Gemara, we have a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama if a very tall sukkah is kosher. Sukkah over 20 amas. Tanakama says it's possible, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. Comes along three students of Rav who tell us that you should know that the Tanakama that was so strict about a sukkah being puzzle over 20 amas, they didn't say it in every case. There are certain cases where they agree to Rabbi Yehuda that the sukkah is going to be kosher, even though it's so tall. First student of Rav goes like this. Kaman Ozla, Hadam Rabbi Yeshua Rav. Now what we want to do now is we're going to quote these students of Rav. Rabbi Yeshua is the first one. And we're going to say, which opinion of why a sukkah is puzzle would he go along with? Because we had three opinions why sukkah over 20 amos is puzzle. Can't see the schach. You need to get shade from the schach, and it needs to be temporary. So Rabbi Yeshua says like this: the machlokes between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda for sukkah that's over 20 amos is kosher puzzle. If the walls of a sukkah need only to be 10 tvachim. You don't need to go all the way up. I can have a fence type wall, and then the upper area of the sukkah could be totally open. 10 tvachim fence, the schach is way up there, and I get a breeze. So comes on Rabbi Yossi and says, when a very tall sukkah is possible, according to the Tanakama, that's if the walls don't go all the way up to the schach. But if the walls go all the way up to the schach, then your eyes are going to follow the walls and you'll be able to see the schach. It's only when it's open where you won't recognize that there's actually something above you, and you won't recognize that you're sitting on the schach. You have to realize that you're in the sukkah. So we say, according to who does this go? I already gave you the Gemara's answer while I was explaining that. Machlekes b'shein defanis megias l'schach. But defanis megias l'schach apil ma'ila mesrama k'sheira. Come on, who does that go like? Kirabba. Goes like Kirabba. Damar mishum d'lei shalta beinam, because he can't see the schach. Given the defanis megias l'schach mishlat shalta beinam. You'll be able to see it. Okay. There's a nice pshat. I think it's the Ritva. It says like this, that when you look up and you have the sun opposite you, so you immediately look back down. The sun is too bright. So the problem of not being able to see the schach is you always look back down when the sun is shining at you. So if the walls don't reach the schach and you look up, you think you're going to look up, you're going to look back down because the sun is there. But if the fanis megias the schach, the whole thing is shaded, so your eyes can go up, you can see the schach. There's no problem. It's a nice pshat.
No. If the schach is
over 20
causes more, forget the size. If it causes more shade, and you up and then you focus on it because there's more shade, there's no problem. You wouldn't turn your eyes.
No.
Maybe wait. Why can't you say that? It needs more shade than But if there were more sun, then you would turn your eyes, because then even if it's pachasli 20. If it didn't have enough, you would move your eyes away because the sun is blinding you.
Like the Stein has a chiddush. Yeah. Yes, chiddush is like this. According to this Ritva, the reason why you need to have more shade than sun in the schach is because you have to be able to see the schach. If you had more sun than shade, then you would look up. So you would have to look back down because there's too much sun there. It's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Taisus points out over here, if that's the case, what about the Mavoi? If we had a Kaira, can you get away with the Kaira? If the walls reach all the, I don't know how that's going to, well, the walls do reach all the way. On the sides, the wall reach all the way up. In the entranceway, it doesn't. What about Ner Chanukah? There's another halacha that we didn't mention. It says that the Chanukah menorah can't be over 20 amas. Let's say the walls go all the way up to the Chanukah menorah. That should also work. That's what Taisus says. He says, no, it's not going to work like that, because over there you just have a beam or you just have a menorah. But over here you have a whole roof and all the schach, so it's much more significant. I don't know if I understand Taisus 100%, because if I have a menorah, I mean, that's what lights do. They sort of like get your attention. They, flashing lights and things. And I mean, that's like what they're there for. If I have this menorah,
especially red and blue ones in your rear view mirror.
a red and blue menorah. If I have the menorah, anyway, but that's what Taisus says, that this heter of Rabbi Yossi wouldn't work for a kaira and the menorah. Okay, next student of Rav. Kaman Oz Lahadam Rav Huna Marav. This is a very famous student of Rav, probably the most famous student. Rav Huna in the name of Rav. He says, Machlekes b'shem be'el arba amas al arba amas. Aval yesh b'yesim arba amas al arba amas bilamayla mesrama k'sheira. If a sukkah is 4 amas by 4 amas wide, okay, then 20 amas tall is going to be a problem. But if it's any larger than 4 amas by 4 amas, make it wider, longer, so then 20 amas tall is not a problem. Even the Tanakhama would agree. Which opinion would that fit with? I would have thought that it could fit with the eyes also, because if you have it very long, I'd be able to see it. But the Gemara doesn't accept that, because we're talking about just a little bit more than 20 amas. So it says like this. Who does that fit with? Kireb Zera, Damar Mishum Tzel, even the Revicha, Ikat Tzel Sukkah. Once you widen the sukkah, then the sun coming down, the shade coming down, if you widen it, then the shadow of the schach is going to be in the sukkah, not against the walls, once you widen it. So that would fit with Reb Zera. Tosfos points out that how high would more than 4 amas work? Let's say I have a 30 amas. Would 5 amas help? Or is it in the ratio? Is it 4 amas to 20? Follow? Every 5 amas, I have to expand 1 amma. Is that how it works? Every 5 amas expanded by 1 amma. That's Tosfos' first shot. Tosfos' second shot is similar to something that we just learned in Masechtas Yoma. He says maybe it doesn't work like that. Maybe it works like how much food is considered eating on Yom Kippur. We said a large date. What about for Oig Melech HaBashan? We said also it's a large date, because even though he doesn't get so satisfied, but at least it's something. So maybe 4 amas is at least it's something, and it's going to work even if it's 20, 30, 40, 50, right? It's always, once it's 4 amas, it doesn't go in proportion. 2 pshatim in Tosfos, 2 terutzim in Tosfos. Okay, Kaman Azla, Hadam Rav Chanan Barabba. According to whom does it go what Rav Chanan Barabba says? Amarav, in the name of Rav. Again, there's 3 students of Rav. The first one was Rabbi Yoshia, the walls reached the schach. That fits with, I have to be able to see the schach, Rava. The second one was Rav Huna, that says that if once it's larger than 4 amas, then it's kosher. That would fit with Reb Zera, that says I need to get shade from the schach, and when it gets wider, I get shade. Then the third one, which we're about to learn, Rav Chanan Barabba says, Amarav machlekes b'shein machzekes el kedei reish ruba b'shulchanei. It's a complicated description of 7 tvachim. The sukkah needs to be able to contain a person's head, the majority of his body, plus a table. Now, they used to recline. So when you would sit in the sukkah, you would have your head, you would have the majority of your body, and then there would be a little tefach table there, which the Gemara tells us later is 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. And that's actually the halacha of how big a sukkah should be. There is one opinion that says a sukkah has to be 6 tvachim. That's Beis Hillel. There's another opinion that says a sukkah has to be 4 amas. That's the opinion of Rebbe. The accepted opinion is 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, which is Reishei Ruba B'Shulchan. Rav Chanan Barabba says that once it's larger than 7 tvachim, than the minimal size of the kosher sukkah, then even if it's over 20 amas, it's going to be kosher. When would it be possible over 20 amas? When it's exactly 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. Aval machzekes yesem if they Reishei B'Shulchan, if it's any more larger than that, afilu ma'ila mesrama k'sheira. Come on, who does that go like? Does it go like the opinion that says it needs to be temporary? You made it a little larger. Is that going to help? No. It goes the opinion that you need to get shade from the schach a little larger. Is that going to help? No. Does it go with the opinion that you need to be able to see the schach a little larger than that? No. You're basically squished inside this little tunnel. None of that is going to help. It says delay kachad. It doesn't fit like any of the 3 opinions. Rashi says later on, we don't know his explanation. Tosfos has an option. Maybe it's not a sukkah, according to him. It's more like a chicken coop. Anyway, we don't have like a real explanation for this opinion. And now the Gemara says like this. 2 of the 3 gave dimensions of a sukkah. 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, 4 amas by 4 amas. Any larger than those dimensions, then even if it's over 20 amas, it's kosher. Rabbi Yoshia, the third one, the first one, he gave his heter was if the walls reach the sky. I understand how Rabbi Yoshia argues with the others. The Inukayavi Shur b'mishcha. They gave the dimensions of a sukkah, the length and width of a sukkah. He didn't give that dimensions to change the halacha. Rav Huna, Rav Chanan Barab, but according to Rav Huna and Rav Chanan Barab and others, I understand the machlokes Rav Yeshia in them. He wasn't talking about dimensions of a sukkah. To him, the difference of what would make a sukkah kosher would be the way the sukkah was built, not the size of it. But those two opinions that say the dimensions of the sukkah, Neima Behachsha Sukkah Kamitlki, very interesting. Let's say that they're actually arguing about what's the minimal size of a kosher sukkah. 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, which they call Reishi Ruba Shulchanai, the head, the body, the table, majority of the body, the table, or 4 amas by 4 amas. Maybe that's their machlokes. The Mar Savar Hechsher Sukkah Bar Ba'amas, the Mar Savar Hechsher Sukkah B'Machzakas Reishi Ruba Shulchanai. Rav Huna holds 4 amas by 4 amas, which later on the next page we'll learn on Sunday. That's Hashem. Is the opinion of Rabbi. And Rav Chanan Barabba holds that a kosher sukkah is 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, which is the opinion of Beis Shammai. We'll learn on Sunday. Yeah, it's not really why are we doing that. We were doing that. That was very important to do that, to find what's the reason why it should be kosher. But why are they not saying the same thing? Probably they're not saying the same thing because they hold that the size of a minimal size of a sukkah is different. Now, this bothers us because it's not the accepted opinion. The accepted opinion amongst the Tanaim is the opinion of Beis Shammai, which is surprising. And we're saying that there's one opinion of the Amirayim that says, Rav Huna says that it's 4 amas. It's a little surprising to us that he should not go according to. So the Gemara says like this, lie. That's not really what they're arguing at. They're not arguing about a minimal size of a sukkah. The Kuli Alma Hechsher Sukkah Reishi Ruba V'Shulchanai. Everyone agrees to what the Gemara's accepted opinion is of a kosher sukkah. It's 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. It's really small. It's like a refrigerator box. And Bahacha Miflagi. The machlekes is a little different. Mar Savar Machzekas Reishi Ruba V'Shulchanai Pligi. Aval Yesim Reishi Ruba V'Shulchanai Dibra Kol Kshera. Chanan Barabba says that the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama about a very tall sukkah is only at the exact minimal size of a sukkah. Any larger than that, it's kosher. Mar Savar, Rav Huna holds, Mireishi Ruba Shulchani Ad Dalet Amis Pligi. You know what? Their machlekes, Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, it's not just about such a fine case of exactly 7 tvachim. They're arguing about the range of 7 tvachim to 4 amas. All of that is a machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama. Aval Yosemi Dalet Amas. Once you get even larger than Dalet Amas, the Kol Kshera, then everyone agrees that it's kosher. Okay, let's leave the Gemara right here. What we did was 3 opinions for the reason, and then we
Thank you. Gotta go.
Bye.
Bye.
And then we gave the students of Rab's opinions of when it's going to be kosher. Okay.
It seems like it's this